Hi everyone, today we will see Doctrine of Rad. Already we have seen Doctrine of Muslim law of inheritance. I've already made a video on shares, residuaries and how much is the fixed shares. Please do go visit over there. And today we will see how this doctrine works and how is it different from the Doctrine of Owl. Let's get started. When the Muslim dies, there are four duties which needs to be performed. The first duty is to pay the funeral and burial expenses. Once it is done, need to pay the debts of the deceased, if any, to the creditors. And after that, the third step is to determine the value or will of the deceased. We know the will should not exceed more than one third of the property value. The fourth step is that after doing all these three steps, and if there is any remainder of the estate or the property, we need to distribute to the heirs of the deceased. Let's assume they are the sharers, and in Muslim law we know that we have fixed unequal share. Unlike Hindu law, when a property gets distributed, it will be distributed equally. But in Muslim law, the shares are fixed and unequal. So if you divide the property unequally, there are three situations could arise. The first is there could be no balance. The second situation could be if you divide it, it will exceed the property value. Thus, the application of doctrine of owl comes into place. The third situation is the residue will happen. That is, if you divide the property unequally, sometimes the balance or residue in the existing property value could arise. So, in that case, doctrine of RAD will emerge. So, let's see how this doctrine works. Let's assume this circle is the property which needs to be distributed, and we have three sharers. So we will divide the property now according to the fixed and unequal shares. So when you divide it unequally, what happened here is you distribute it. Now what happened in the property, there is a balance, that is there is a residue left in the property. So to get rid of this balance, what we are following here is the share is proportionately increased for each shares and we are distributing that property. So after increasing the shares, if you distribute the property, then there will be no residue left. This concept, this principle is called Doctrine of Rad. So whenever there is a residue, we are increasing the share proportionately so that there will be no balance. So now there is a no residue left behind. So this is called Doctrine of Rad. This is the definition of RAD. Suppose if there is a residue left after splitting the property and in the absence of residuary heirs, we need to revert back the residue by increasing the shares of the sharers. This is called Doctrine of RAD. So when a Muslim dies, let's assume there are three sharers, sharer 1, sharer 2 and sharer 3. And let's assume X is the fractional share for the sharer 1 and Y for sharer 2 and Z for sharer 3. And if you sum it up, X plus Y plus Z, all these fractional shares, if it is less than 1, that is less than 90, means if there is a residue left in the existing property after splitting the share, then what happens is we need to revert the residue back to the sharers in the absence of residuary heirs. So how it is done is by increasing the share value of the sharers, we will revert back the residue. So this concept is called Doctrine of Rad. So these are the four steps which you need to follow generally to apply the Doctrine of Rad. First is to reduce the fractional shares to the common denominator. Once it is done, sum up the numerator. This numerator will now become the new denominator. So by decreasing the denominator, obviously the shares is going to increase. After that, the shares are allotted. Now let's see the first illustration. Deceased leaves behind mother and the daughter. So the mother share is 1 by 6 because of daughter and daughter share is 1 by 2 because there is no son. So sharers, residuaries, all these things have made one video. Please go do visit over there to get an idea. So now what we need to do is we need to reduce it to the common denominator. So if you sum it up 1 by 6 plus 1 by 2. So the common denominator is 6 and 2, if you take, the common denominator is 6. If you take LCM 6 and 2, then common denominator is 6. So now if you see 1 plus 3 by 6. So equal to 4 by 6, which is equal to 2 by 3. So 2 by 3 is less than unity, right? So what happens is there is a residue, that is a remainder. 1 by 3 is there. After adding the shares, 1 by 3 is left. So now we need to apply this doctrine. So the next step is new denominator. We need to reduce the denominator in order to increase the share of the mother and daughter proportionately. So how we are going to do is, the sum of numerator will become new denominator as per the previous step. So new denominator is 4. So what happens is, now the mother share is 1 by new denominator is 4, and daughter share is new denominator is 4. So instead of mother share 1 by 6 and daughter share 3 by 6, now the share is increased proportionately by decreasing the denominator. That is, now new share is 1 by 4 and daughter share is 3 by 4. This is how doctrine of RAD works. So if you can sum it up, 1 by 4 plus 3 by 4 equal to 1. So there is no residue left. So if one of the sharers is husband or wife, they cannot claim the benefit of this doctrine. So what happens is, once you allot the share to the husband or wife, the steps which we follow is little more complicated, but if we get hands-on, it is also easy only. So first step is calculate the residue after deducting the husband or wife share. So once it is done, it is similar to the previous steps, that is reducing the fractional shares to common denominator and then summing up the numerator. Once it is done, we are going to decrease the denominator to make it equal to the sum of numerator. After that, allotting the shares by multiplying it with the residue which we have calculated in the first step. So this is how it works when husband or wife are present as sharers. Now let's see the next illustration. Now the deceased leaves behind husband, mother and daughter. See, in one of the sharers is husband. So the steps would be different with compared to the previous illustration. So husband share is 1 by 4, mother share is 1 by 6 and daughter share is 1 by 2 since there is no son. So if you sum it up and take the common denominator. So if you take 4, 6 and 2 as LCM, then the common denominator will be 12. So if you reduce it to common denominator and add it, then what happens is, it will become 3 plus 2 plus 6 by 12, which is equal to 11 by 12. Now it is less than 1. That is 1 by 12 is the remainder. This is the residue. So we have to apply the doctrine of RAD. So if one of the sharers is husband and wife, they cannot claim the benefit of this doctrine if other heirs are present. So other heirs, mother and daughter are present. So husband cannot claim the benefit. So husband share is the same. As we have seen 1 by 4, it is the same share for the husband. So after deducting husband share, the remaining is the residue. So 1 minus 1 by 4 equal to 3 by 4. That is the residue. 3 by 4 is the residue. As we have seen in the first step, we have calculated the residue. So the next step is to calculate the new share of mother and daughter. We need to apply the doctrine of RAD for mother and daughter since husband cannot claim the benefit. So mother share is 1 by 6, daughter share is 1 by 2. So in this case, we need to sum it up to reduce into common denominator. So 6 and 2 LCM is 6, which is 1 plus 3 by 6 equal to 4 by 6. Now the new denominator is the sum of the numerator, which is 4. So here comes the trickiest part. So here now the new share of the mother is 1 by 4 of residue, which is equal to residue we have calculated in the previous step, which is 3 by 4. So we need to calculate this 1 by 4 into 3 by 4. That is 1 by 4 of residue is equal to 1 by 4 into 3 by 4 equal to 3 by 16. Similarly, for daughter, it is 3 by 4 of residue equal to 3 by 4 into what is the residue? 3 by 4, which is equal to 9 by 16. So the new share of mother and daughter are 3 by 16 and 9 by 16. So in the general this thing we are not multiplying with the residue because there is no husband or wife share. But if there is any husband or wife share, we need to calculate the residue and multiply the new share of mother into the residue so that the share of the mother and daughter is getting increased. So then now the share is mother share is 3 by 16, daughters is 9 by 16, and husband share is 1 by 4. So in order to make it to the same denominator as all the three sharers, so 1 by 4 or 4 by 16. So 4 by 16 is 1 by 4 only. Since we need to make all the sharers in the same denominator, we are making the husband's 1 by 4 as 4 by 16. So if you sum it up, 3 by 16 plus 9 by 16 plus 4 by 16 equal to 16 by 16, which is equal to 1. Now it is equal to 1. There is no residue left behind. Thus the doctrine of RAD applies in order to increase the share of mother and daughter, and we are keeping the husband share as same 1 by 4 as the initial step because he cannot claim the doctrine of RAD benefit. So that's all. Thank you so much for listening to this video. If you do have any doubts or feedback, please put it in the comment section, and thank you once again.